All right, welcome once again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain and hopefully make some more complex concepts a little more relatable and understandable. I am Heath, that is Sam, and we are going to be continuing our discussions on stupid, annoying things today.
Yes, welcome to Social Distillation, and this is the first episode trying out the new mic. So hopefully the sound is better. I was given feedback that I was a little echoey. So just a little reintroduction of ourselves, because at this point, we never know when it's going to be somebody's first episode. That's Heath. I'm Sam. I'm a little bit more liberal. He's a little bit more conservative. We've been friends going way back. We're both crotchety old men and felt a need to kind of start speaking out on some things and actually start trying to make sense of a lot of the mess that's going on in the media right now and basically with society. That's the background of the name, social distillation. It's like distilling liquor. You're trying to get the pure stuff from the mess. Now, a lot of people are going to think, well, Sam, you said you're liberal, but you sound like you're on the right. Well, I got a visual for that. Here's my political compass. A little bit left, mostly center, and down towards the bottom because I'm Texan and we like our freedom. But here's what we got in society nowadays. If you are a far left authoritarian, acceptable.
Share your screen.
Everything else is Nazi. So if you live in New York or California or something, you're going to say, yeah, you're a conservative, Sam, but in Texas, I'm a bleeding heart liberal, libtard, whatever you want to call me. So, all right. Oh, did I not make it to where you can share?
No.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
What are you sharing?
Okay, are you ready for me to start in on the stuff, or are you still doing the background mumbo jumbo?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, so last time we were talking about COVID in particular and the data and its transmission and our inability to talk about it, sometimes our inability to find data on it because the studies themselves either aren't happening or are being censored. And I want to go into the impact of all that and how that matters to real people. And we are going to start with this guy. All right, so here we are on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, and first start out by saying this stuff is annoyingly hard to find, harder than it should be. I had to do a little bit more digging than I thought for some very basic statistics. And the first one is simply unemployment. So think back, and a lot of people either don't remember or didn't know at the time, the US economy was in a really good spot right before the pandemic hit.
Is there any way you can blow that up? Zoom it in. It's readable, just we're getting old.
All right, here we go. How's that?
That's better. Okay.
All right, so here we have, and I've put this on just 2020. So you see, January and February, 3.5% unemployment. Most economists will call that zero because you're always going to have a few percent because you're always going to have people transitioning. So if you've got unemployment down that low, you basically have zero unemployment. Anyone who wants a job has a job. And then you see in April that obviously spikes big time. And it stayed high through the summer and even into the fall, continued to stay fairly high, double of what it was. Now, the unemployment percent can be a little funky and a little fudged. So uh, a companion to that is uh, labor force participation is one of the ways, one of the things this is called. This is essentially all employees, all non-farm employees uh, currently working, and this is in thousands. So you have over 150 million people employed in the first couple of months of 2020, and then it crashes a lot. So those are a lot of people who are no longer employed, and that number stayed low and didn't recover all that much through the end of the year. So there were a lot of people still out of work. And keep in mind what we were rambling about last time is you're not even allowed to question the lockdown policies. If you do, you hate grandma and you want people to die. Well, here's reason to question that. You have a lot of people hurting economically. So maybe we should say, so remember the lockdowns started about the 1st of March or 1st of March, 1st of April, depending on where you live, and continued on through and even into September, October. Why weren't we allowed to raise our hand and say, hey guys, we've been doing this for 6 months and we were told 3 weeks to flatten the curve. Maybe we should rethink things. Maybe we should question things.
If lockdowns didn't work the first time, why do it a second time? That it might be an exact quote. I don't know. It's pretty close. Dan Crenshaw just recently. But yeah, it's the narrative. So they're using the narrative to perpetuate the lockdowns. And that's kind of our whole point with the last episode was to, if you got these numbers, would you be complying the same as if you got other numbers? And we went through I'll bring them up. Can you pull your screen down?
Yeah, I have some more nerdy numbers to share, but
not going to be on the right screen right away, but okay, here we go. So we've got our excess death numbers, and we went over last time that trend line. You do see there is excess death, and what we had was a disease, a novel virus, and of course there is reason to be cautious. As we see, it is a new way of nature trying to kill us, which, if you really think about it logically, that's normal. Nature's always trying to kill us. We've gotten comfortable in our houses and our AC with our Uber Eats delivered to us and everything, that we forget that sometimes. But nature is always trying to kill us, and we're, from an evolutionary standpoint, trying to get better at surviving. And humans did that with technology for the main part. So it's easy to lose sight of that. Now, what we have with the excess death numbers is the area over that curve is not the same as we're getting with the CDC, close to 500,000 people dead in the United States from it. That number in 2020 was somewhere, and again, we're going by estimated numbers, so I'm going to give an estimated answer. Somewhere around 120 to 150,000 is the area over that curve. And would we be having the same discussion? Yes, it is 150-ish thousand additional deaths last year. But when you look at other causes of death, the flu kills about 120 to 160,000 every year. So do we shut the country down for the flu? No. Accidents, about 70,000 every year. Do we shut down all the roads? No. So would we be having the same discussion if we knew the actual numbers? And those numbers are inflated because everybody who died that had COVID was recorded as a COVID death, whether it was a car accident or actually in conjunction with the flu. And with this same source, you can get those numbers as well, who had the flu, pneumonia, and COVID, but it was counted as a COVID death. So if we were given an honest depiction of the actual things happening, would we be having the same discussion? Would the narrative be the same? The key word with all of today's discussion is narrative. Would the narrative be the same? And if the narrative wasn't the same, would we be doing the same things? Because we vote accordingly, we comply accordingly. If every business just decided to open, what would they do? Nothing. You can't shut down every business, and you would have to bring martial law, and well, we know where that goes.
Well, and the point of the narrative is to circumvent thinking, circumvent critical thinking. That's why I nerded out on Gustav Le Bon and crowd psychology, because you're being whipped into a frenzy. You're being manipulated with fear, and the auto accident example is my favorite illustration of this. Is we don't act like this with anything else. The way we're acting with the COVID lockdowns and the severity of the cure for this pandemic. Auto accidents account for one of, if not the highest, death and injury total in the United States every year. We have a lot of accidents, especially compared to other places.
Well, we drive a lot compared to other places.
In large part because we drive a lot compared to other places. So if we were thinking and acting the same way we are with the COVID response, with other forms of death and injury, we would institute a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit on all roads. That would, to me, is the equivalent of how we're acting. And of course, because you don't want to have to drive 3 states over to see grandma at 35 miles an hour, no one would put up with that, because we understand the real life impact and aspect of that, and we're not being whipped into a frenzy because it's not novel, it's not new, so we're able to think. Going back to my economic data, let me nerd out on a couple more things. Now, this one was kind of annoying to find. So, more importantly, to my mind, than the unemployment numbers, because yeah, if you lose your job, that sucks a lot. But what sucks more is if you can't find another job, even when things start to improve. So my concern through all of this is how many businesses are closing and how many are closing permanently. So this is from Yelp. They did a study on businesses that are on their site. So annoyingly, I couldn't find any government statistics on this. But this gives you at least an idea of what has happened here. And so starting in April, you see things, you see a significant number of businesses closing. And the 2 lines here, the red line here is permanent. So these are businesses that have been marked as permanently closed by their owners. And that has continued to rise from April through to August. And again, why can't we sometime in the middle of the summer raise our hands and say, what happened to 3 weeks to flatten the curve? Why are we still doing this when all of these people are losing their businesses? So we already know that tens of millions of people are losing their jobs, but then how many thousands, if not millions, of businesses close? And as a small business owner, you could probably explain this better than I can and make it more relatable to people. But when someone opens a small business, which is most of the businesses in the United States, they put in a lot of their savings. They go into debt. You can't just turn around and open another one. I feel like a lot of people think that business owners
but it's covered by the insurance. That was the argument. No, it's not, by the way.
Yeah. And I feel like there's this weird perception that a lot of people think that a business owner is Scrooge McDuck with his vault full of golden coins that he goes swimming in. That's not even how big businesses operate most of the time. You don't just have a big pile of cash. So if the business dies, you can't necessarily restart it. Certainly not right away. It's going to take you time to uh, rebuild the capital that you need to restart that business. And if there are no jobs to be had, then how are you going to get that capital?
Well, let's add to that some things that are going down uh, currently. If you're a small business owner, not only are you trying to rebuild, but they're trying to push for a higher minimum wage and things like that. All of these things designed to destroy small businesses. Uh, they're
Meanwhile,
counterproductive. Yeah.
I've heard from several sources that Amazon has doubled its businesses. And I don't think it was just Amazon. I think it's like Amazon, Walmart, basically the big corporations that were allowed to stay open. They have
Mhm.
doubled their business over the pandemic. Meanwhile, all of these things are closing down. And
Well,
you had
let's go back to we had the Time magazine article
Mhm.
last week. Who they spell out all the strategy and everything that went on, but they never said who all the actors in what they called the cabal was. They called themselves the cabal. We're not calling them that. They called
Mhm.
themselves the cabal. Who were all the actors in this creating the narrative? And that was the whole point. They swayed the election. They call it fortified.
Mhm.
Their word was fortified because it's for our own good. They swayed the election. They swayed everything by creating the narrative. And who were all the actors? Who has access to what movies you see, what media you get, what books you can order? Oh, I'm just gonna to say it. I have a visual for this, but Dr. Deborah So was pulled from Target in her end of gender. It's again pulling the opposite narrative down. It doesn't matter what the science says. She's a scientist and she studies gender, but her book was pulled down. So who controls that? And where was Amazon in all this? Amazon had the servers for Parler and they suspended them indefinitely to get around the rules of canceling them. And so who controls the narrative?
You had last time you pulled up the numbers on infections by state, cases by state, and uh, we talked about how whether the state is more open or more strictly locked down, it doesn't seem to be affecting uh, new cases and infection numbers that much. But you can see the impact of the lockdowns on uh, business closures for sure. Here you have three large metros in California and New York where they've been much more strictly locked down, and you have significantly more permanent closures. And then California as a whole obviously is really hurting. But even Texas and Florida up there, but that's partly because they're such big states. But even with even with being more open, you still have a significant disruption to the economy here. And uh, the reason I wanted to bring this up is I'm going to nerd out on something that if you've watched the show The Expanse, they talk about this, I think, in like season 2 or 3. Um, there's a uh, there's an idea called cascade failure in complex systems. If you go looking for speech Michael Crichton gave on this before his death a few times, he got into this shortly before his death. This idea of complex systems and the study of complex systems and our understanding of them. And the more complex a system, basically, in a nutshell, the more complex a system, the more disruptions that system can absorb. Well, an economy is a complex system. It's a whole bunch of different parts working together. So you can take a hit to the travel industry or something, and the economy as a whole can keep ticking. Well, you will reach a point, and we've seen this before. This is what the Great Depression was. If the system takes enough hits, it will collapse. So if you have enough business closures across industries, then the economy can't absorb that. There are just too many people out of work and not enough job possibilities for those people. And that's where you get to something like the Great Depression and things go kerplop. And
You create a dependency too.
yes,
And we start hearing words like build back better, great reset. And the World Economic Forum somehow wants this huge great reset, and everything since 2010, again, that's an important year. Everything since 2010 has been leading up to this. But between 2000 and 2010, we cut world poverty in half. Why do we need a reset from that? We were on our way to do it. Now that we're going to get diminishing returns, that half might have been a quarter the next decade, and then an eighth the next decade, because that's just how systems work. But we cut poverty in half in the 10 years between 2000 and 2010 across the world. Why do we need a great reset? You brought up the unemployment numbers here in the US. Why did we need a reset here? And these are the questions we need to start asking. Again, our whole point with our podcast is just start asking questions. Does this even make sense? That's the first question anybody should ask. Go on.
and well, you mentioned dependency, which leads right into my last source here. This is from Pew Research, and this is just since the coronavirus outbreak started, is what these numbers are. And so they did a survey, and so you see this table here. Use money from savings retirement to pay bills, having trouble paying bills, gotten food from a food bank or organization, having problems paying the rent or mortgage. So all adults, significant numbers. So a third, a quarter, and then 17-16%. And then obviously that's going to be much more severe in lower income, because again, higher income, it's like a more complex system. The more income or assets you have, the more you can absorb shocks to the system. And obviously lower income people cannot. And I think that's important, because the people instituting these lockdowns, and from what I've seen, a lot of the people praising these lockdowns or pushing these lockdowns are not lower income people. A lot of them aren't even middle income people. These are people who can absorb this shock. These are people that will be fine. The politicians are still going to have their jobs. The journalists are still going to have things to talk about. It's the people who work in that bar that got shut down. It's the person who owns that bar that got shut down. They're the people who are going to suffer for this, not the people who are actually making the policy.
And again, we get to complex systems. Remember, with a free liberal society, the market needs to be checked by the government, and the government needs to be checked by the people. So what does the market have to do to uncheck the government is create the narrative. So
And the last one is from this, because I think this is important too. It's not just the unemployment numbers. So we went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for that, but the Pew survey points out there were a lot of people that had to take a pay cut. So they didn't lose their job, but they're still having trouble making ends meet, because in order to get through, they've lost hours, or they've had to take a pay cut to keep their job due to the lockdown restrictions. And so you have 32% of all adults say they had to take a pay cut to stay employed. That's going to be a shock to that system. That's going to make it hard for them to absorb this disruption and make it through to the other side. And this is why I keep harping on, hey, does anyone remember 3 weeks to flatten the curve? There's no end in sight. We've never been given a day. We have vaccines coming online now, and we have yet to be told, okay, X number of people vaccinated means we can end all this. I mean, you have people saying, well, no, you're going to have to keep wearing masks until 2022, or when does it stop? If you've had to take a pay cut, if you've lost your business, if you're trying to limp along just to make it through, and yet there's no through, then you're screwed.
But yeah, let's go to masks, because I think that's a debate that personally to me was, I think the mask debate, it seemed preloaded. It seemed ready to go. And I personally think it was a distraction. And I was blocked by someone on Facebook because I just made the comment that they weren't a big deal. And I got all this, oh, but they don't work, and da, 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 da. Never, ever, ever, no evidence. And I was like, all I need is one to win this argument. All I need is one example where they worked. And the same thing happens the other way. They help with everything. Well, all I need is one example where they'd be harmful. So the mask debate to me was a distraction. If it didn't become political, I bet you would have had better adherence, because you wouldn't have had the whole group of people that dug their heels in to fight against it. If it had been just, well, this helps a little bit, more people would have done it, I think, because nobody wants to get sick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want the flu. It ain't going to kill me, but I don't want it. It sucks. I don't want gonorrhea. You can take some antibiotics and get over it, but I don't want it. It sucks, right? So same thing with COVID, and we don't know the long-term effects. I had it, but I didn't want it, and I hope those effects go away at some point. But so if you just said, hey, in these situations, if we had had that discussion, this is I guess my overall point on it. If we had taken the approach of they can help, then we could have had the nuanced discussion of when do they help and when do they hurt. And so we're outdoors. We're spaced out 6 feet. Social distancing outdoors is better than the mask because there's air. Viruses are density dependent. The more you breathe in, the more likely your immune system is not going to be able to handle it, because we have natural killer cells that kill everything. Otherwise, we would die. Nature is trying to kill us all the time. So we have some of that, and the more you breathe in, the more likely you are to get it, and the more you breathe in, the worse the case too. So that brings us into when it could be bad. Well, say maybe I was exposed to it, and I was exposed in a way that maybe my immune system would have been able to handle, at least even with a mild case. But I wear a mask when I really didn't need to. Now I'm rebreathing my own air. And viruses have no brain. They don't want to kill their host because then they die with the host. So they want to be breathed out and breathed in by a new host. All they do is replicate, but you breathe it back in, it doesn't have a brain to know it doesn't have a new host. So you breathe it back in, it re-replicates, and you just perpetuate this snowball going down the hill. And so if you're wearing a mask when you probably didn't need to, you could be making your own case worse. So.
Yeah, and this is back to what we talked about last time, where everything is political, and politics is a zero-sum false choice game. So everything had to be extreme. It's why we weren't allowed to have rational discussions about this. You either wear a mask or you hate grandma and want people to die. No, you're a fascist and you're literally Hitler because you're making people wear a mask. Hey, maybe we could have a rational discussion about this first.
But
no, okay.
Here's why it's an important distraction, though. If we're fighting about masks and we never had that nuanced discussion, which I just gave 2 small little points of, well, we can expand that discussion. Okay, we're outside, we're distanced apart, we're not facing each other, talking into each other's face. Well, guess what? Maybe outdoor dining can stay open. We don't have to shut that down. Maybe if we have a big enough room, we could find the density, we can get an estimated number of the density that is required for you to your immune system, a normal immune system, to not get sick. And we can kind of come up with an estimated number, go on the low end because we want to play it safe. Okay, you can have this many people in a 10,000 square foot restaurant. We could have had those discussions, but we didn't because everybody stayed at the mask. Wear it or don't wear it. And then you got your people digging their heels in. I'm never going to wear it. And you got your people that wear a mask in their car by themselves.
Hey, you don't know, maybe someone broke into their car and licked their steering wheel while they were in the store.
You know,
So
whatever. But it's also, we can look back at the data. I said we have data now. We didn't get the spike that people thought we were going to get with the protests and riots over the summer and with the Trump rallies and all of that. So both sides getting together outside in mass, and we didn't have the spike we thought we were going to have. It went up some. I think I have the numbers on my screen right now. It went up some, but it wasn't the huge spike that originally they thought. So here's last summer right here, June, July, a little bit because people are getting together, but it wasn't near what we got the next winter, which happened to coincide with flu season, but you know.
because that's generally how respiratory infections work.
Remember the connection I brought up when we were talking about the states. What were the highest per million? Places that get cold early. So people are inside together. And we saw the numbers shifting from state to state because I was following a lot of people from Oregon during the riots and protests to get the inside scoop because they're there and it's not what you're getting on CNN. And they were talking about, oh, open your windows, go outside. And they weren't spiking at that time, but places like Texas and Florida and Arizona and everything were spiking because it's 110 degrees here and we wanted to get in the AC. And then you saw that shift north when it got colder up there. But down here, it was like, hey, it's only 90. We're going to go outside.
Yep.
So we spent more time outside. And so you saw it shift north because of the weather patterns, not because coronavirus knows what it's doing and it wanted to take a vacation.
So even more basic, something you maybe think of when you're talking about the masks is something even more basic to me, because I'm more politics minded. So you're looking at the infection data and the numbers, and we need to have a discussion on that. One of the things that drove me crazy very early on is we never had a discussion, a debate on whether or not the government has the authority to do what they did in the first place. And I don't know if there have been significant court challenges to much of this. I know some of the more specific things have been challenged, but just in general. Now, technically, there have been Supreme Court cases in the past, I know, that more extreme things that we would not normally put up with in American society can be done in the name of public health temporarily. And one of the first things I was saying back in the spring was, hold on a second. If you don't have an end date, then how is this temporary?
Well, not only that, the reason for doing it has to be in the public's best interest. And so you have to convince the public it's in their best interest. And the narrative we're getting is 500,000 people dead, 40 million, whatever, 20, 30 million people infected. Oh, vaccines, you still may be able to spread it. Oh, if you don't wear a mask, you're going to die. If you go and eat food outside, you're going to die and everything. Well, I'm going to quote Elon Musk here. Hey, you can't talk people out of a good panic. So you have to create a panic to create the situation where, yes, the people say, yeah, you can do that, government. We'll comply.
Well, if you, so first of all, like I say, I don't think the government has the authority to do this in the first place, but can we, if you disagree with me, can we at least agree that if the government is going to do this, they need to pass a law? Because most of these things, to my knowledge, have been done by executive order, by mayors or by governors. Shouldn't the people's elected body at least get together and discuss this and pass a law?
Well, that's the great debate right now, because originally the justification for executive orders was the time frame. like you said, 2 to 3 weeks to flatten the curve. That was done by executive order. It was the time frame. We've had almost a year now for a legislature to get together and have a debate.
Yeah.
In every state, and in some states they have. We're in the one of the great free states here, and we've had time now, and it still hasn't been done. And as the people, we need to be asking why. Because one of my pet peeves is people not doing their job. I hate when people don't do their job. And as the voting base, we need to be holding these people we voted for accountable for doing their damn job.
Yes, which they don't want to, because if you do your job as a politician, you can be held accountable to something. If you just talk a lot, then all you have to do is keep that mob moving from one target to the next, and then you never have to actually do anything, and you get to live off of that government gravy train.
Yeah, but doing nothing is still doing something. It's still something to be held accountable for. You didn't do anything.
It should be, but it's again crowd psychology. You just keep that mob moving from one target to the next, and then you get a free pass. Now eventually it cycles around. I mean, you see that in the French Revolution, where the people who started the First Republic all ended up being guillotined themselves. But you see it even now on the left, as it's becoming more radical, and they keep kind of eating their own as people turn on them. To that extent, let me share my last screen here. So we talk about this being political, and this drives me crazy. Okay, so this is from Slate. For anyone who doesn't follow politics, this is not a conservative site. This is definitely a left-leaning site.
Yes.
Okay. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, and you might not, because it's not getting a lot of reporting, Governor Cuomo in New York is under fire because it is finally going mainstream. Some of us have known about this since like last summer, because it was being reported, but it was being ignored in a lot of media. Cuomo issued an executive order that required nursing home and other similar care facilities to admit COVID positive patients. And then to fudge the numbers on the impact of that order, you were not counted as a nursing home death unless you actually died on the grounds of the nursing home. So if a nursing home resident went into some sort of respiratory distress and had to be taken to the hospital, as soon as they leave the grounds, they're no longer counted as a nursing home death. They could die in transit to the hospital, and that's not counted as a nursing home death, in order to fudge the numbers. And this is starting to come out now. And this is an editorial. Why do Democrats pretend Andrew Cuomo did a good job with COVID? That's a good question. And this guy takes some shots at him, and I think rightly deserved. Cuomo's popularity nonetheless surged during the crisis, both in his own state and nationally. He was celebrated for the daily press briefings in which he used emphatic language and visual aids to give statistical updates and public health advice, a seeming embrace of proactive, fact-based governing that many found especially refreshing in comparison with then President Donald Trump's rambling, reality-averse, erratically held White House press sessions. The results may not have always been there, Cuomo's fans seem to be reasoning, but at least he was embodying the right values. People are literally dying from an insane order that was given for who knows what reason, but it's okay because Orange Man bad and this one's our guy.
Well, the wording is so eerily similar to that Time article too, because that last sentence, at least he was embodying the right values. Remember, they kept saying the correct result, the proper result. So it's eerily similar how these things go hand in hand.
And this is something that I've been, ranting about and why nobody likes me anymore because I don't like Trump, but I also don't like the rabidly anti-Trump, and I don't understand how you can't see that you're literally just the mirror image of what you're ranting about.
Mhm.
You are so rabidly anti-Trump that you're every bit as blind as the rabidly pro-Trump. That
Mhm.
you have allied yourself with people and causes that are pretty terrible, and you can't see it because all you care about is damaging the guy who's not even in office, and it's still going on. And so I love.
Let me get my screen back because
Hold
I'm
on,
gonna
I want to go to
okay.
this guy's conclusion real quick. Um, so he talks about a Siena College poll that after the nursing home scandal broke, found that 83% of New York Democrats still approve of Cuomo's handling of COVID, with more than 80% also saying specifically that they approve of his work communicating with the people of New York and providing accurate information. To hammer home the cognitive dissonance, only 54% said he'd done a good job making public all data about COVID related deaths of nursing home patients, which suggests both that 54% of New York Democrats are full of it and that a significant portion of the rest know Cuomo is full of it, but don't care. To many voters, celebrating the idea of a confident blue state governor is more important than reckoning with the reality of a serially underachieving chief executive playing three-card Monte with dead bodies. At this point, Andrew Cuomo could probably shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. And that is a more extreme example of what we're talking about the mask debate of it the data doesn't matter. It's about virtue signaling. Well, the data should matter. Stop virtue signaling, stop ranting, and let's use a little logic and critical thinking here.
Well, it goes back to, hold on. I was trying to look something up. Where do I want to go with this? There was two ways I wanted to go with it. It's that concept creep.
Yes.
And we debated a little bit, I think it was episode 2, about social sciences being actual science. And the problem is a lot of these people that are trying to change science know the real science. Yeah, that's where I wanted to go with this. Bring up my screen here. We've been guinea pigs in the mood experimentation. So basically, Facebook used their algorithms to study whether they could make people more angry at each other. This is a real thing, folks.
I really love that article too, because keep in mind that we talked about that cabal, as they called themselves, to fortify the election in that time article. Facebook was a major player in that. They were a
Yeah,
major player
Zuckerberg
in.
meeting with election officials to see how they should do things in order to get the result they want. They admitted to it in the freaking article.
Mhm.
And of course, there's a money trail and paper trail behind that one too. So they studied how to manipulate us. And everybody runs under the assumption they cannot be manipulated. And that's the most dangerous mindset you could have. You need to understand that you can be. Now, there's a spectrum of that. 20% are easily manipulated, and this is actually studied as well. 20% of people will, if you repeat something enough, they'll believe it. 20% almost are impossible to brainwash. And then everybody in the middle is kind of a spectrum of that. But you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it enough, it starts to become a fact. And that's where this this concept creep kind of comes in, where we bring up another visual here. I said 2010 was an important year. Look at words that start appearing in the media. New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post. The word racist and racism around 2011 shot through the roof. Repeated, 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 repeated. Does this actually have the numbers on it? I don't see them.
No, I don't see numbers, just percent of all words.
It was almost every 100 words for the Washington Post there. So racial privilege, whiteness, racial hierarchies, white supremacists. That's the big one right there. White supremacists from, what is that, about 2014 on. And what's the narrative now? The most dangerous threat to the United States is white nationalism, white supremacists. And you're hearing it over and over and over again. Repeat, repeat, repeat. All from people that are part of this cabal to get the result they wanted. Where do we go from here? We need to have the social science discussion, but let me bring up the clipping, the narrative.
Yes.
As promised, we were talking about clipping people's videos and audio to create a narrative. So you're using their own words against them, but it's not what they say. It's just the appearance of what they said. And why I wanted to bring it up was you saw this in the impeachment trial. What they did was they created a video for the trial as part of the evidence with clips of Trump's speech, of course, clipping out anything that said peaceful and patriotic. Yeah. But they also clipped it with scenes from the riot at different times. And also with things that happened over the course of the year. And so it looked like, if you watch the video, that he is encouraging this act that's going on right there. And that's the whole key to it actually being a legal, something not covered under a freedom of speech standpoint would be that he was actually actively inciting it there in real time. That's what it takes for it to not be just freedom of speech and his opinion versus actually inciting the riot. So they created this narrative with this video as evidence. That's dangerous. You take someone like an evolutionary biologist who's going to make these kind of statements. So you ask an evolutionary biologist about race, he might say something like, let me bring up that visual so I don't have to, so nobody can clip me here. All right. I study apes for a living because of how similar in behavior they are to humans. White people, black people, Asian people are like apes. If I'm amazed at the commonality across species, why would I think something as insignificant as skin color makes a difference? Everything that I underlined, if you just clip that together and someone really good at it could get a good audio or even video out of it. I study apes for a living. Clip. Black people, clip. Are like apes, clip. I think skin color, clip. Or I think, clip, skin color makes a difference. You get a pretty bad statement out of somebody. But then the bold, if you rearrange it, again, timelines, it gets even worse. I study apes for a living, clip. Black people, clip. Are like apes, clip. Rearrange. They are, clip. Similar in behavior, clip. I think, clip, skin color makes a difference. These two on the bottom are a completely different narrative than the one on the top. The one on the top, shoot, that is, I mean, realistically, if you're talking to a biologist and you're trying to accuse them of being racist, that's exactly what they're thinking in their head. I think we're freaking Jordan Peterson and his lobster example. we're like freaking lobsters in a lot of ways. Why would I think the melanin in your skin makes that big of a difference?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to preface that with the impeachment, because, you know, even prefacing it with that, I feel like my instinct, and I would think some people is, yeah, that's kind of an extreme example, except we just saw it You just talked about how this literally happened. And this is what's so frightening to me is that literally just happened to the most powerful person in the world. If they can do that, and this is why I've been ranting about the anti-Trump rampers. If they can do this to the most powerful person in the world under the guise of Orange Man bad, under the guise of we really don't like this guy, what can be done to you, a normal schlub? And you don't have the resources to defend yourself. You don't have the fans to defend yourself that Donald Trump has. That's why truth matters. That's why facts matter.
Well, and it sets precedent. This is technically not a court, but it was a court. It was a hearing. It was a legal hearing, even though they're trying to say, well, it's different. Well, so now someone's wife dies. They take him in for questioning. They're recording it, and he says, "What, you think I killed my wife?" And they clip out, "I killed my wife." And a jury who doesn't know him from Adam only hears, "I killed my wife."
And the technology is making it easier to do this. It's getting creepier and creepier. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but go read up on what's called deep fakes.
Oh yeah. Well, I gotta hope my wife doesn't die now, because I just said I killed my wife on tape 3 times. That somebody could clip. So she has to outlive me, which is good, because she
yeah, it's gonna happen. So
yeah.
I lost my train of thought there. So say something.
Well, we bring it all back. Go back. This Time magazine article is so important because they spelled it out for you. And again, we bring back the 98% approval rating. People are saying, "Oh yeah, it was for our own good." But you go back, ask questions. Why was John Sullivan? If you haven't heard his name, look him up, because the media doesn't want you to know about him, because CNN paid him $35,000 for his videos. And I think it was MSNBC paid him another $40,000 for his videos in the Capitol. He is a professional, basically professional troublemaker. What his organization, I think, is insurrection.org. And he's been at all the BLM riots, the Antifa riots, and he stirs up trouble to get it on videotape so he can sell his videos. And he was there. Now, again, it's a complicated situation on January 6th. There were a lot of people who thought they were doing the right thing for Trump there as well. But he was there, and he was paid $35,000 by CNN to get the videos. And of course, they were clipped, so you see the parts you want. Why? Ask why. Why are you supporting somebody who was in there, and why is he not in jail like the old lady that just kind of wandered in, and you see Granny on a picture going, "Wow, I'm in the Capitol." She's going to jail. Why isn't he? He was there starting trouble. He's on video starting trouble. He released all his videos, and luckily people saved it. How does COVID play into this? How do the lockdowns play into this? Going back to the cabal, mail-in votes was key. 50 million mail-in votes this time around, which is, what was it? Probably 100-fold what it normally is. I don't know, someone could look up the numbers on that, but still 50 million votes by mail. And without the mail-in balloting and the rules changed to do so, we have a different result.
I just thought of this is my history nerdiness coming out. This is a great story of history that's very illustrative of why I'm becoming more cranky and libertarian in my old age. So here's another extreme example of why it matters why you do something, and why it matters how you frame an argument. So you can get away with completely manufacturing and clipping Donald Trump because he's literally Hitler. So if you're a rabid anti-Trumper, there is nothing that is too extreme to take out Hitler, right? I mean, we were developing the atom bomb to drop on Germany. They just happened to be defeated before it was ready. So there's nothing too extreme to take out Hitler because he's so terrible. So What would you say about the federal government literally killing people, not through a court of law, not through due process, but literally killing people because they were engaged in an illegal activity? Is that an extreme example? Is that a it couldn't happen here example? Let's get in the Wayback Machine and go to, again, this is Slate. So these aren't exactly small government libertarian crazies here. This is a story from Prohibition. And this is 1926 is where the story starts. 1926, Christmas Eve. Party goer stumbles into Bellevue Hospital, dies of alcohol poisoning. Doctors were accustomed to alcohol poisoning by then, the routine of life in the Prohibition era. The bootlegged whiskeys and so-called gins often made people sick. The liquor produced in hidden stills frequently came tainted with metals and other impurities. But this outbreak was bizarrely different. The deaths, as investigators would shortly realize, came courtesy of the US government. Frustrated that people continued to consume so much alcohol even after it was banned, federal officials had decided to try a different kind of enforcement. They ordered the poisoning of industrial alcohols manufactured in the United States, products regularly stolen by bootleggers and resold as drinkable spirits. The idea was to scare people into giving up illicit drinking. Instead, by the time Prohibition ended in 1933, the federal poisoning program, by some estimates, had killed at least 10,000 people.
Learn something new every day.
So, because drinking was so bad, in the minds of people who instituted this program, it was okay to poison 10,000 people without any sort of due process, just because they were breaking the law against drinking, which was bad.
Well, we'll keep adding to the body count of the current situation. I don't have the graphic up, but the county around Las Vegas is currently, and this is pretty close to what the national numbers are coming out to, at double the child suicide rate. And they're like, oh, well, we can't say it's because of lockdowns and being out of school, but I mean, we've got one change in the last year versus the year before.
Yeah, and everything we know about child psychology would indicate that
we're social animals.
Yep.
We are social animals. We need it. And as a child, you have developmental stages. Oh, don't get me started on the developmental stages, because we got the trans issue too. Developmental stages where things are more important than others. Who's to say 5 years from now, colleges accepting kids into college are going to be like, well, your 11-year-old was in a state where they didn't open schools during the pandemic, versus this person was 11 in a state that was open in this important time, especially for things like reading and arithmetic and things that need to be coded in your brain with repetition. Again, brainwashing, repetition. Mm-hmm. Repetition could be a good thing if it's for a positive result. I got to be careful how I say that, because Time magazine says they were giving the positive result. But repetition is a good thing when it comes to learning, and especially at that age, you have developmental stages. Well, socially, you have developmental stages too, and you need these brain chemical releases, or you start looking inward. No 9-year-old should be leaving a freaking suicide. I'm trying not to cuss on this one. Freaking suicide note that says, "What's the point?" And he did it after the day he got the news that they weren't reopening that next year. Because no kid should be even thinking about what's the point. Yeah. They should be thinking if little Tim is going to play with him tomorrow, or sorry, this one hits close to home. Okay, you want compassion, you want liberalism. Yep. Everything, infinite resources. You can understand that and still be limited. To still be liberal. So your compassion is also a resource. and you pick where you put it. And you want to say, oh, you're killing grandma by opening the schools? No, you're killing the freaking kids.
Mhm.
And as adults in the room, I'm speaking to you, teachers union, as adults in the room, we do things as adults and take risks for our children.
And here we are coming up on almost a year since all this started. Here we are in the end of February. March is when it started to pick up steam, and when lockdown started to happen. So almost a year of this after 3 weeks to flatten the curve, and we're not allowed to talk about it. The narrative doesn't let you ask questions. And at some point, I think maybe it should have happened after 3 months when we were told 3 weeks, but at some point, we have to raise our hands and say, hold on a second. The cure appears to be worse than the disease. And you look at the job numbers, you look at the child suicide numbers, just those two by themselves should be enough to say, okay, hold on. No, we have to do something. We have to do something completely different because this isn't working. Not only is it not working, but this is bad.
Well,
This
when we
is
look
having
at
a
excess
negative
death
impact.
number, yeah,
Mhm.
that excess death number can be attributed to COVID because of those other increases as well. Adult suicide's up too. How many people lost their job? They were on the verge of depression, and now they're gone.
It,
How,
it, if you're already kind of on edge, if you're someone who's already on edge and you have a trigger like this, then I feel like you can absolutely blame it on, yeah, it would have been great if that person would have gotten help before then, you know, but the trigger was the job loss. And that's I think can absolutely be blamed on that.
Mhm. Well, and everybody goes, what were they thinking? Yeah, yes, I'm in the camp that says suicide is selfish. Uh, but at the same time, I also understand that they weren't thinking.
Yeah.
Very few people think, you know what, this is a good idea to just end everything permanently. Uh, they weren't thinking in that moment. And that's what you brought up. The key word was trigger. A lot of people are right on that edge. And for a freaking 9-year-old to be on that edge,
Mm-hmm.
we've got a lot of things building up to that. And I bring up the critical theories. If we notice, if you look through everything in our complex system that is society, everything that is touched by this is getting worse. And that includes our school systems because it's huge in the education departments. Or psychology. Psychology has gone woke. Oh, I promised, let me lighten this up. I promised I'd piss you off today.
Oh no.
Let me share a screen with you. You said math is the only real science.
Oh no.
Oregon Department is promoting a training program that will offer a toolkit to help teachers develop an anti-racist math practice because math is racist. Math perpetuates white supremacy. And so I said, okay, you complain about Twitter quotes being news. So I said, let me look at some things. Oh, let me get to my tabs.
All right. While you're doing that,
Oh no,
this is why I say,
these are scholarly articles on
oh
dismantling
gosh.
racism in mathematics, mathematics instruction, mathematics teaching. Science has been hijacked, my friends.
So this is why, and on purpose, you kind of teased this earlier when you talked about you said something about how the people that know better are the ones hijacking it on purpose.
Mhm.
And and,
Well,
and
because
it's
okay, well, let me further this point before it leaves my flaky mind. We brought up dependency earlier. If you create a generation of people who can't do math, who can't science right, you create a generation of people who are dependent on those who can, and guess who's going to select who can? The elites.
this is why I say it's not the only real science, but it's the purest science, and the farther you go away from that, the less pure it becomes. because it is wholly objective. What the heck does, all right, I've got 2 cough drops here, or I've got a cough drop in this hand and a cough drop in this hand. How many cough drops do I have? That's math. There's no subjectivity here. It's this one and it's this one. I have 2.
Hey, but if you have a hen and you have a rooster and you put them together, then you have a hen, a rooster, and an egg. So 1 + 1 = 3. Or if 2.4 plus 2.4 rounds down to 2 + 2, but they equal 4.8, rounds up to 5. 2 + 2 = 5. These, for those in the audience that think I'm just spouting stupid shit, this is real debate right now. And frankly, if the first one was what they mean by decolonizing math, we're getting canceled for this statement. No wonder the colonials won.
Well, okay, well, let's go all in. And no, that actually is a good point. It's kind of a harsh point because they won through some pretty brutal and terrible things.
Yeah.
But think about where Western civilization was compared to the places they were colonizing. Why? Because Western civilization had a long tradition of scientific inquiry, of fact-based, objective-based scientific inquiry that built off of what came before it, so that you can trace from those early industrial revolution, that started to happen around the time water wheels started to be introduced in large scale for manufacture in the 1700s, even before the steam powered revolution of the 1800s. But you can trace that all the way back to the Greeks, if not earlier. You get Archimedes was like, he was Bronze Age. Archimedes was like 300 BC, 200 BC, something like that. And those principles follow all the way through into modern science that created a power that was unrivaled across the world, and that the rest of the world soon started to try and emulate. So what happens when you start to destroy the most basic fundamental aspects of scientific inquiry? 1 + 1 = 2. No, it doesn't. Okay, well, you've just destroyed everything. You've just destroyed the whole system, and we have to start all over.
Well, and again, if you go through this new way, quote unquote, new way of learning, eventually you're going to get to the other end, and reality always wins. And so you're going to have no skills that are viable in the real world. And when that happens, you end up dependent. And so the people on the top, the people who are perpetuating this, they're relying on that, because the more dependent you are, the more powerful they are. And one of the things the postmodernists believe, as we go back to that, is power. Power determines everything. Power determines truth. You hear a lot now. Listen for repeated words. When you're watching the news now, everybody out there, when you're watching the news, listen for the repeated words, because across networks, you can even look up the compilations where they're saying the exact same words. And one of the statements that's going around a lot is speak truth to power. Speak truth to power. That alternative news site, that's lying, that's misinformation. Speak truth to power. No, they're speaking their statements to truth. So it becomes your truth, your reality. And when your reality doesn't match real reality, they have the power.
You've triggered a lot of ranting here. And so something else that just popped into my head is something that has been driving me crazy for a long time is when I see people posting these dumb memes about how they need to teach life skills in high school. Why didn't anyone teach me how to balance it?
Why is algebra always sacrificed? if you understood algebra, you'd be able to handle all the data sets that I bring forward and put in front of you. Algebra is one of the most useful skills anybody can learn. It is logic and math. You get one side of the equation, you get the other side of the equation, and you make it work. Even if you don't know the fancy trick, you can always work it out in algebra.
So you're saying exactly what I was about to explain here. Our parents and grandparents were never taught a class of how to balance a checkbook or change a tire or all this other crap you see on these dumb memes. And they figured it out. Why? Because they were taught how to think, not what to think. What the postmodernists, what you're talking about with the postmodernists is they want to teach you what to think. The education system used to be teaching you how to think. So you
let's
learn
go back to the cabal. It's not just in school.
You learn for the sake of learning. You learn for the sake of learning so that you can teach yourself. Oh, good gracious.
They're starting early. This is called brainwashing, people. This is called brainwashing. This is why we need to start watching our schools like hawks. In New Hampshire, they're having litigation on whether this should be, here we go, allowed in schools. This is real. For those of us our base in Texas, that probably is the majority of people at this point, they don't know because it's not as big here. You really have to look for it. But in some parts of this is standard education now. And it's showing up in our media. Watch the cartoons they watch. I just brought one up that it's one thing at a time. It's that developmental age. So this young child saw that, goes through that little cartoon skit where they talk about white privilege, and I've watched the whole cartoon, you know, the experience of a black person in America. And then the purple alien is like, well, why should I not be purple? That takes away from your blackness if we're colorblind. This is all going into this child's head and then being repeated. And then they see it at school, it's being repeated. Then they see it on another TV show, it's being repeated. And I think this is one of the benefits of me being in my little hidey hole working for the last 10 years, because I didn't watch TV. I didn't watch the news. I didn't watch any of that. And I didn't have this repetition. Now I go back and I watch shows that I missed, knowing about the critical theories and the critical stance. It's there, it's everywhere. It little things here. Oh, this hospital was systemically racist. Or sports, just over and over again. They're saying this, they're saying this, they're saying this, they're saying this. These are all on purpose. These are trained activists in the media. That's why you saw those numbers shoot up at about 2010. This is when these activists are going into the market. If you're in the media, you have a liberal arts or communication degree. You have been fed this line over and over and over again. And now you're also trained. We went back to that 4-point pillar of critical theories. The fourth one is you have to be an activist. You have to be actively challenging the system to dismantle it at the end of the day. And so now they're in control of all that. And then all the liberal arts people who couldn't get a job, they're the ones screaming for student loan forgiveness. So we've got activists on the bottom, activists on the top, and everybody's stuck in the middle. That was rant number 2.
That was good rant, and I'm not sure.
Not quite as heated as the child suicide rates. But this is as mad as I get. If anybody ever accuses me of yelling at them, you know it didn't happen, because the child suicide rant was as heated as I get. So I'm a pretty stoic person.
Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up for now. Keep in mind that this is, again and again and again, we have to say this is being done on purpose. These are people that have been trained with this ideology for the purpose of gaining power, because power creates truth. Power is reality.
When they create your truth, and we start hearing this over and over again, especially when a hoax gets brought forward, it's like, well, their truth is more important than the actual facts. That was, I think, in the Smith College hoax, those exact words. Well, their truth was more important than the actual facts in the case. And we're hearing this over and over again. And I'm bringing back a statement I brought up. I think it was the first one, which we didn't have video with that one. So if you didn't watch it, it's okay. We'll bring up those same points. But if the personal truths don't match the population data, that means a lot of people are lying, or their perception is so far off that they believe
Yeah.
they're telling the truth. And that, I think there's about a half and half there. Some people know that it's like, oh, a good example is the NASCAR. What was the guy's name? Bubba Wallace.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out that was a hoax. And in his interview with Don Lemon, I believe, who's one of the greatest journalists of the 21st century, he made a statement was, I've been lucky, but I'm pretty sure most people haven't had the good experience I have. And I'm like, I bet you a lot of the people that are saying that they're oppressed could make that exact same statement, but they're pretty sure everybody else is having the exact experience. And with that mindset, it allows people to come in and say, well, yeah, all these people are. And then they show you one video of 330 million people. And you say, oh yeah, systemic racism. It's one video. If the population data doesn't match the narrative, then a lot of people are lying.
Yeah. So take a step back, look at data, do some critical thinking, and especially tune your ears to listen for those repeated words and phrases. And that's your cue to kind of to step back and look at things more critically.
Well, and I'm going to take it one step further before we close, is take that step back before you share it, before you comment on it, before you perpetuate the meme. I heard this term the other day, is if I know what you're going to say in response to what I say before you say it, you're no longer part of the general intelligence of humanity. You are a mimetic propagator. Mimetic propagator means you're no better than that virus. All you do is replicate. That your only skill now is replication of what's called the meme, which is basically the societal version of genetic replication. So you see something perpetuate. Language is a meme. In the religious side is going to hate this, but religion is a form of a meme. So if you're a mimetic perpetuator, systemic racism is a meme. And now that if you share it without thinking about it, you have left the general intelligence. We humans can think through things. Start doing it. That's the first step.
Absolutely.
Even if you come to the same conclusion. You may come to the same conclusion. Just think about it for a second. All right. Anything else?
Nope. Go think.
Go think.